let's start. So, first of all, thank you very much for being here. We had to reshuffle the rooms so that to have a good settings for our professional persons in charge of recording this course. So thank you for being here on time. It's a great pleasure for us to host Professor Jean van der Donkt from the Université Catholique de Louvain-la-Neuve in Belgium. Jean van der Donkt is an outstanding person, expert in human-computer interaction. The background is information systems, well-known, very famous person, invited everywhere in the world, for example, in Stanford, in Spain, for example, Valencia University, also in Grenoble. It's a good tradition we have to work together. We had several European projects together, so it's the second time Jean is invited professor here in Grenoble, and so it's really an honor for us to host him again, and a pleasure for us to give him and you this opportunity to have this special lecture about user interface prototyping. So Jean is also a very kind person, so feel free to ask questions. So the point is really that you take benefit from this session. You know that user interfaces prototyping is something that is key, not only for this course and for your project, but also in the future. You know that in companies you will have to sketch user interfaces, to prototype user interfaces. This is really key for showing people the design you have in mind. And so being capable of communicating about your design, about the rationale of your design is something that is key. And Jean is expert in the field with several PhDs about this topic in particular. So take this opportunity to ask questions, to learn as much as possible from Jean. Jean is here in Grenoble until June, so it will be possible to have further collaboration with him. Nevertheless, it's really a huge opportunity for you to discuss with him. So listen to him, try to learn as much as possible. And now it's time for Jean to provide you as much information as possible about this key topic we have in human-computer interaction. So thank you very much, Jean, and have fun, everybody.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me in the back properly? Yes? Is it okay like that? I apologize in advance for my Belgian accent. It's also a great pleasure for me to be here and to share with you my experience in this area of user interface prototyping. So this presentation is actually twofold. First, I would like to share my experience with you so that you can apply it right now, right here, in the context of your HCI project, and I will give you some guidelines and show you some examples on how to do that and what not to do also. And also, I hope that maybe in the future, in your professional job, you will be asked to be the responsible person for the user interface of a future project. Who knows? Maybe it will happen to you. So here I will also give you models, techniques, tools for ensuring an appropriate user interface prototyping throughout the development lifecycle. Don't hesitate to stop me if you like, or if you have any question, don't hesitate to raise your hand. It's a pleasure for me. Interaction is not just human-computer interaction, it could be also human-to-human interaction. Usually I'd like to start by referring to the basic Quintilian question. Quintilian was a Roman philosopher, and he said that if you want to address any topic in your life, you have to ask yourself a series of basic fundamental questions. Who, what, why, where, when, how, and by what means. These are very simple questions, but I will try to address them one by one regarding to user interface prototyping. What does it mean for these different questions? So let's start by asking first, what is a user interface prototype? Well, you have, I guess, a very rough idea of what it is. So in general, I'd like to repeat Wikipedia's definition. A prototype is an early sample or model built to test a concept. It could be a user interface, but not necessarily a user interface. It could be a product, a service, a software, a hardware, or a process on which you can reason about so that you can learn from it and improve your design. Very important is that the notion of a representation is associated with a prototype. We will see that in a few minutes. As an example, I'd like to start with this very rough block of wood. Can you imagine what type of prototype is this? It's a true one. Of course, it's almost impossible to imagine. Jeff Hawkins, who invented the first Palm Pilot interface, was wearing this block of wood in his pocket, and just in the middle of the meetings, he said, "Oh, here is my block of wood, and imagine that you have a tactile interface on which you can write with a pen." And he was asking people, "Can you give me some ideas on how can I sketch things, how can I write things on this piece of wood?" And then people was giving him some feedback, and after a while, he drew this very first sketch, which finally gives the first tactile interface of the Palm Pilot, which disappeared today, I guess. I think that nobody is still using it today. It's already in the museum. So, a interface, a prototype is not just the product, it's also the complete process in order to reach a very good user interface in the end. So it serves several purposes. First, to explore the problem space from the user point of view, but also the solution point of view from the designer or the developer. Because sometimes when you ask real end user, "Can you give me some feedback on what you like or what you dislike?" they will tell you. But then the reaction of the developer will say, "Oh, this is impossible to do, it's just too complicated, I can't do this." So maybe the user wants something that is maybe very difficult to develop or not, or vice versa. Is that the developer say, "Oh, this is a very nice website, this is the best solution for you forever." And then the user says, "No, I don't like it, it's not the way I work." Let me give you a real-world example. A few years ago, our team was consulting for the Belgian government. They contracted a very famous German software company that was responsible for developing a very large application for the Belgian government to be used by about 500 users. And it was explicitly written, this application should be compliant with the usability guidelines from the French CNRS, which is a reference one. It's very well established. And then when they delivered the application, nobody was able to use it. Nobody, even the expert users, who were supposed the best users. And what happened is that nobody has been involved in the prototyping process. So they delivered the application, and it was very different from what people expected. So much different that in the end nobody was able to use it. So they had to redevelop from scratch. And they paid a lot of euros for that. And for nothing. So it's not just for exploring the problem, but also to be sure that we are right. So the representation is something that is very important. We say that a prototype, especially for user interface, could be physical, when of course it is done offline, I mean separately from any software. For instance, you could have a user interface prototype on a piece of paper or on sheet of paper, and then we say it's contemplative, because the only thing is what you can have from it is that you just look at it and that's it. That's all you have. So this is why I say what you see is all what you get, nothing more. It could be a little bit reactive if, for instance, you draw different sketches and you ask people, here is the first screen, what do you think about it? They react, you can take some notes, then you can present end user with another screen, and you have a dialogue. You have something that is more interactive. Yet, it's not the perfect solution. So here is an example, for instance, when after a session, the wall of our lab is full of pieces of paper like this, with a lot of screenshots or drawings or sketches, but it's contemplative. You look at it, that's it. Or even another example here, where we have used post-its, and each post-it refers to one part of a screen. It could be a menu bar, a cascading menu, or lateral menu, information part, message part, an advertisement. So each post-it represents one part of the screen. But here we don't know yet whether it will be a website, or maybe a desktop application, or maybe a smartphone. We don't know yet. We just try to sketch different regions. And each time we add a yellow post-it, we would like to see whether this user requirement has been satisfied, yes or no. For instance, if a user says, I really would like to subscribe to this newsletter in a very short amount of time without any error, and we have this configuration, then we say that maybe this configuration will help this user to achieve a goal. Then we can have a frame. We group this part onto a piece of paper, but we don't know yet whether it will be a screen, a web page, or whatever. We don't know yet. We just try to structure things. And in the end, we also ensure transition between those things. Here is another example when we have drawn maps with different links, etc., and everything is on paper in the end. The nice thing with paper is that everybody can do it, and you can imagine that the end users are probably the best drawers, even better than the developers themselves. For instance, in some of our empirical studies, we asked real developers to draw or to sketch real user interfaces, and we asked non-expert people to draw, and end users are very good, even better than developers. You know why? Because the developers know all the details, and they want to have every fine-grained detail represented in the prototype, as opposed to the end user who don't know that, and they just sketch what they want, full stop. They don't want to talk about colors, fonts, etc., so they draw. So here is another example of a prototype with a map, so it could be a Google map or whatever, and then you have a series of buttons for navigating, for prompting things, for displaying points of interest, for reaching location, whatever. But this is purely physical and nothing reactive, unless you talk with end users. You could use another technique to make it a little bit more reactive, called the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz has been invented by IBM in the 80s when they tried to prototype the first word processor by vocal input. So instead of typing everything on your keyboard, they want to prototype a system where you can issue vocally the commands and say your letter. For instance, hi Henry, how are you doing today? I'm writing you this letter for etc., etc. Of course, the system was not yet built. But before developing it, because it was very expensive at that time, today it's straightforward, they imagined you have the end user here, talking with an imaginary computer here that is connected with another person who is in another room, usually next door, maybe in a separate room, and trying to make some reaction depending on the user behavior. So for instance, if the user says, there Henry, I'm writing this letter, so here is trying to mimic a screen where the text is actually recognized and already produced in the letter. But how to distinguish, for instance, from the contents of the letter and a comment? Like, for instance, if I say, there Henry, are you bold? And you say bold, does it mean that it is the character of the person, or you want to put it in bold? So this is the interpretation of the other persons that makes the system reactive. So there is no secret, it's just reaction. A second category of prototype is called, of course, digital. So instead of drawing things on paper, you can, of course, imagine to have your prototype with any piece of software. And I will give you some of the most interesting software here as examples for you to sketch that. And we say that, for instance, you can have one predefined path, so one screen, another ring, very boring. Many paths, at least you have some choices, but everything is predefined. The user cannot change this, because all the paths have been pre-thought, or you can make it more reactive. So even if some path is not already predefined in the software or in the prototype, you can leave it open so that you can gather some feedback from the end users, especially for things that are very reactive. Like, for instance, if I'm inputting data, if I'm making errors, or if I'm doing extraneous things. Second thing is, you can, of course, mix all of these things. And it is very surprising that if you look at end users, sometimes they come with very different material. For instance, we have been working in the domain of touristic websites. And what is very surprising is that from one town to another, at least in Belgium, probably it's the same in other countries, I don't know, but they have in their prototype more or less the same functionalities, like what are the museums, what are the points of interest, what are the best restaurants, it's very interesting, or what are the nice places. But what they say is that I want exactly the same website as this town which is just 15 kilometers away, but radically different because I don't want to have the same look and feel, and I don't want to have my website exactly the same as the other one. But I want to have the same functionalities. So what they do is that they take some screenshots, they take some pictures, and they come at the prototyping session and say, this is what I want, but not exactly like that, I want this, 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 and that. So you take that into account. We can do that also later. Or you can take some pictures, or you can use also another technology, but that's another thing. So a prototype can have different durations over time. You can produce a very first user-face prototype just to throw an ID on the table and say, is this something that you would like to have? Yes or no? If no, okay, you throw it to the trash, and then you continue with another. Or it could have more time. For instance, in a limited lifetime, the prototype is expected to say at least one session. And in the end, we will decide if the user wants to keep it or not. If they want to keep it, then you're lucky. You can start with a very good starting point next time. And you can then extend lifetime until it is persistent, is that in the end, your prototype becomes almost the final version of the future system, and you can keep it for documentation, for purposes, for design history, etc. The nice thing is that in the beginning, when you start to sketch things, you don't need to have a lot of details. The most important is to draw or to sketch. We will see some sketching tool later on, but not with too much details. Otherwise, people are lost with the details, and they don't concentrate on the creative part. And the nice thing is that while you have less and less possibilities in the prototype, you will have a better knowledge about usability problems. One of the most interesting features of user-face prototyping is that you can discover problems even before you implement anything. And this is very, very cost-effective. For this purpose, there are two different important notions. The first one, which is really the most important, is called the level of fidelity. Even if you have in mind, for instance, like in the touristic website, we know already that this website will be implemented in HTML5, maybe with PHP, but we don't want to prototype it in that language. Why? Because people tend to focus on details in that case. So we start with what is called a low level of fidelity. It means that the prototype I will try to sketch does not convey or does not make any reference to any technological environment later on. I don't know whether it will be a website. I don't know whether it will run on a smartphone, on a tablet, maybe a vocal interface, a graphical one, a tactile one, a touchable one, or even haptic, or why not gustatory or olfactive. So I'm just trying to have very low fidelity. It means that I will sketch things without making any reference to the technological space. When I will consider these constraints imposed by the device, by the platform, by the screen resolution or whatever, then I will draw things, but not at the beginning. So I will start with low fidelity, start then with moderate, and finish with high. I will give you some examples later on, but keep in mind, level of fidelity, 3 levels. Start with low, gracefully evolve to medium, and then to high. You can mix different things, but again, we'll see that on some examples later on. Surprisingly is that if I'm, for instance, this is a medium fidelity example. As you can see, I have drawn a toggle button, or here an apply push button. It does not convey any look and feel of a particular operating system. I don't know whether it will be for iOS, for macOS, for Linux, or for Windows. I don't know. And I don't mind. I don't want. Because otherwise people will tend or will even believe that your system is already finished or will be ready to be shipped next week, and they will use it next week. If your prototype is too fine-grained, they will believe that it's so easy that next week it will run and they will have it in their hands. So deliberately, we try to draw it like this, with rugged lines, unfinished, even rubbish, so that it looks unfinished. In that way, deliberately, and I'm not a very good drawer, and as you can see, I'm not a very good drawer at all, Deliberately, I don't draw things in a refined or polished way, so that end user don't believe that it's finished, or close to. Second notion is the level of details. It's not necessary to provide end user with all the details at once, and in the first step. You can have different levels of details, but not for the first step. Do things progressively. Is that I can have a level of detail that is rather informal, like I've drawn over there, as you have seen, with unpolished things. Or I can have things that are very polished. If I'm really developing, for instance, an application for this smartphone for iOS 9.3, for instance, which is very specific, then, okay, I can have maybe a high level of details or fidelity, but it's not necessary. Here is an example of difference. On the left, well, you can have an idea of rough sketches as opposed to a very polished drawing, which gives the end user the impression that the system is already decided and there is no more any degree of freedom to change things, which end user hate, because of course if they are here to work with you is that they want to give their opinion. Different types of prototypes. If we decompose an entire interactive application with the functional core, where you have the semantic functions like database functions, etc., the control part and the user interface, which is the part that, of course, the end user can see. Those two parts are invisible to the end user. We say that an horizontal prototype tries to cover a little bit of everything of the user interface, a little bit, but a lot of functionalities. So in this way you touch a lot of things, but not very profoundly. On the opposite side, we say that a prototype is vertical. It means that you choose a very narrow function, like for instance, I want the end user to subscribe to a newsletter, and you prototype it throughout the task, so that the task in the end is complete. So the user is able to complete the task with the prototype, even if it's not a real one. And in the middle here, in this square, the intersection is called a scenario. A scenario is a very precise script of actions that the user needs to do in order to reach a goal. For instance, if I want to subscribe to a newsletter, I have to do this step, I have to log in, I have to create my account, I have to enter this parameter, I have to enter the frequency with which I want to receive my newsletter or whatever. So it's very precise. You can do that as well. This is called one scenario. Today, you can choose, for instance, in your project assignment, whether you want to have to start with horizontal prototyping, so you touch several things, but a little bit, so as to make people reactive, or you want to make it vertical. You choose one function and you go straight forward until the end. These days, we tend to prefer what is called, what I'm calling diagonal prototyping. Is that instead of doing this, but not enough, and this is too profound but too narrow, is that I'm touching a little bit of different things, but with different level of depth. Especially, did you have already heard about Agile Methodologies? So this is typical of Agile Methodologies. It means you don't want to start with too many things. You choose a limited set of functions of your future applications. You prototype them with different levels of details. Maybe this one does not need a lot. This one, yes, because it's very critical. And as soon as you are done, you try to iterate and to complete the rest of the picture. So this is my favorite type of prototyping today. You can have different approach also, like starting with the presentation, the navigation within one screen or across screens, whatever. Again, but this is my preference, I'd like to start with presentation things, because people are much more reactive with the presentation than with the navigation. Navigation comes afterwards, and people cannot feel very well the navigation until they have seen the real screens before. Second question is that why is prototyping so important today? I think you are pretty much convinced, at least I hope so. But the main reasons are very numerous. The first one, which is the most important, is to discover as fast as possible all usability problems and to check whether your prototype will meet or not the end user requirements. So it means that if you have elicited some requirements, like for instance the user wants to achieve this task within 5 minutes without any error for everybody, so you don't need to be an expert or a frequent user to achieve this task, this is a requirement. Or to discover usability problems, like for instance, this is one of my most favorite ones. I guess that you all know the Wiimote, right? Do you remember the main usability problems with this very first version of the Wiimote by Nintendo? If you have had the chance to use one in the past. Any idea about the problems? Yes? Yeah, you're close. I saw your gesture. Yes? No? Say that again? Yes, you need two hands.
I mean the left-handed person.
Ah, left-handed. Yes, that's right. Because of course, well, here you have a cord joining the two devices. But then, if you have a right-handed person or left-handed person, does it make sense to invert? Was it supported? Yes or no? We don't know. What the type of problems can you imagine? Or if you remember them? Yes?
I don't see the thing at the bottom, since maybe the people just threw the...
This is a joystick.
The screen. No. Nowadays we can attach the remote to your wrist.
Yes, that's the new version. That's today's version.
With this one, maybe you just threw it at the screen.
Exactly. That was the most frequent problem, is that since the Wiimote was not supposed to be grasped in your hand very easily, people were playing, and then what happened is that they threw it, and then they left it, and the Wiimote was just crashing on the screen, or the cord between the two devices was crushed or unplugged, and it was also very unnatural, because on the one hand you have a joystick, and on the other hand you have the Wiimote with another control. Why not having all the controls just on one device and force the user to have two devices with a cord that you, especially when you have to game with this thing, this is really unnatural. So the two most frequent problems that they saw when they shipped this Nintendo is that people were throwing it on the screens. And second, there were two separate things. And they had a lot of problems with the cords being unplugged. Well, here you just plug in and plug out, that's okay, but here it's completely attached to, it was completely broken. So this is why today, as you said, maybe you can, well, you have here a way to keep it in the hand, even if you leave it. And maybe you can notice here you have some bubbles to grasp the device in your hand more comfortably and more safely, and avoid being slippery. So perhaps, if they had to prototype this before, at least with one user, I'm sure that if they had prototyped it with one user, they could have seen that, especially with this type of gesture, they could see this problem, or at least anticipate. Another very important reason is that, of course, people, when they would like to, they're invited. Imagine that you're responsible for, especially in your project assignment, when you imagine to have some real user of your future application, you invite them to prototype the interface with you. You have to let them to be creative and not constrain them at the beginning. Later on, yes. So usually I say that end users are always right, but not always right. They are always right because they are the end users, but not always, because sometimes they would like to have things that are not good for them, and they don't know it until they use it. They say, oh, I would like to have this nice feature for me, it will be very nice for my user interface. You do it, develop them, you give them in their hands, and then say, oh, no, it was awful, I want to have something completely different. So in order to avoid that, prototype. In the two notions that I told you, level of freedom and level of details, sometimes, well, level of details is more important than level of fidelity. It means that try to increase the level of detail first, and then the level of fidelity. Because try to start with a reduced user interface prototype in the beginning, And when you see that people tend to agree, then you can expand with other functionalities, other features, or more details, and then increase the level of fidelity. Also, when the level of fidelity is low and not too high, it really encourages people to participate. Because if the level of fidelity is too high, for instance, if I'm already drawing a user interface, let's say in Microsoft Windows, you will have what I'm calling a war. Because this person say, oh, I want to have this very nice color. No, 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 I want to have this yellow. No, no, I want to have this orange, because it's much more better. Orange is my favorite color. And then you have also the guerrilla on style guides. The marketing people say, oh, we have to be compliant with the style guide of the corporate environment. So you have to have the 3D logo turning with animation in the left corner so that you can spend 5 minutes looking at it and lose your time. So performance is more important than preference. So no war on colors, fonts, backgrounds, etc. No low level of fidelity. Other examples, yes, these I will skip for a moment. Now, how can we do properly user interface prototype? First, how, and then with which, by what means, with what software. So a few history before is that mankind is probably very well known for the very first activity of the mankind is drawing. Already 12,000 years before Christus, we had already drawings in our history. Why did people make this drawing? Because they had an intention. They want to communicate something. They were saying that they were running after animals to chase them, to hit them, of course. So here the drawing was not just for the pleasure. The intention was to communicate something. So this is for drawing. But drawing is different from sketching. Because sketching, like in this case, for sketching a house, a building, or whatever, the goal of sketching is not to communicate, is to specify something that you would like to reach. For instance, if you have an idea of your future house, you don't draw it, you sketch it. Because you want to specify first how your future house will look like, even before building it, or even before making any plans. So here, for instance, I'm sketching something, well, it's not me, an artist has sketched maybe a very nice building just to give the customer a very rough idea of what it will look, how it will look like in the future. And then when the customer is happy with that, you can go with the next step, the real blueprint, or even a 3D prototype, well, in this case a very nice house. But this is a real prototype then. But never architect people do this immediately. They start with sketches, they refine the sketches progressively until they reach a very well-defined design. Then they go to blueprints, which are the actual plans for creating the house. So they give an idea of how the house will be built, and then they start building. So the prototyping life cycle could be decomposed roughly into 4 steps. So if you have to do it in your HI project, you can go through these 4 steps, and sometimes it's not necessarily to have a lot of time. First, drawing by sketching, prototyping, it means you gather things, then sharing all the sketches and test them, we'll see them one by one, and then discussing all together. So first, the typical session, for instance, for a user interface prototyping, what we do is that we invite some people, not a lot, not a lot of people, 2, 3 to start with, maybe 4, not more. You don't need to involve too many people. You ask them to sketch screens. You're responsible to do the homepage or the first screen. You will be responsible to sketch the main menu. You will be responsible for sketching the form for subscribing to a newsletter, for instance. And you can work separately, you can work collaboratively, you can work remotely sometimes, or you can work together at same time, same place, whatever. And then when you are done, we gather everything so as to make transition from all the screens. This is the prototype. And then we gather people to say, what do you think now with this path? how do you react to that? And we'll see that also in some video. And then we discuss and we reflect. Is it okay? No. This is not okay, so we move things. And then we iterate. How many iterations? We don't know. There is no stopping criteria, unfortunately. But usually we do 4 or 5. Not more, because afterwards it's too much work and we are losing time. So in the slides you will find out a few tips for conducting each of these 4 activities. First, for sketching, just draw it. Ask people to sketch things, and you don't have any idea how end users are very good at sketching. Just ask them to sketch, but give them a very firm deadline. Like, for instance, if you're responsible for sketching the menu, you have 2 hours, not more. Not because we want to do that in rush or we want to make some pressure, but because it's not needed. People have already a very good idea in mind, and they will come up with something very interesting in a very short amount of time. But if you let them have really an entire day, they will come up with hundreds of possibilities. And surprisingly, they will start first with their most important idea first, and then they will elaborate. But it's not needed. You can put different regions, and you can assign them to different people. You can reproduce that. Okay, that's for drawing. Prototyping, come up with only 2 or 3 versions, not more. Again, because people tend to be very good at first. If you give them more time or more resources, etc., they will come up with other things that are not necessary. It's very important to explore some design, but not too many. Or you can have 2 or 3 versions, maybe also with local variants, but this is what I'm calling a version. Then, when everybody, or more or less everybody is done, call people back, gather everybody, and then try to make the prototype together, and discuss them for sharing all the screens and testing. First, you have to select real users. For instance, never use your friends or your colleagues. Why? Because they are the worst evaluators. For instance, if I'm inviting my colleagues to test my system, they would like to please me or to be very friendly with me, or so they will do everything that, like I would like to do it, etc. They will not be very nasty with me. So don't invite your best friends or your family. Invite people who are completely neutral, otherwise they will react like that. Prepare a very specific scenario, like for instance, can you subscribe to a newsletter? Yes or no? Do this with the sketches. And if you cannot do it, please tell me why you can't. Is there any hindrance? Is there any reason? Or would like something to be improved? Let me give you another example I'm thinking now. For a charity organization we have been working with a few years ago, they had one requirement. Just delete a donator, a person who is giving money to the charity, right? So the requirement is very easy. Delete from the database 1 person. We can sketch that in 1 minute. And while we were prototyping that in Visual Basic, it was just 5 lines of code in Visual Basic. Select the record, delete record, done. Then, of course, what happened is that when they tried, people will say, oh, I deleted this person and I didn't want to do so. Okay, so indeed, I completely forgot a very important usability guideline saying that any destructive operation should be confirmed before. So I added a message, would you like to delete this person from the database? Yes or no? Please confirm. Okay. It was 2 more or 3 or more lines of code and a few sketches more. And then after more time, when they said, oh, I have deleted this person, but I forgot to give this person the administrative form stating that this person has paid 100 euros this year for the taxes. We didn't know because we deleted this person and we didn't know. And of course, the donator complained that he didn't receive that. So we say, oh, that's not a problem, we'll add some more code. So we wrote 100 lines of Visual Basic, checking whether this person has already received this administrative form, yes or no. And if not, of course, we have to compose it, to print it, and to send it. Okay, that was the first version. Then after even more time said, oh, sorry, but we deleted this person. Yes, we confirmed it. And yes, this person receives all the documents for taxes. But what we didn't know is that this person is a regular donator, but only for very exceptional events, which appear sometimes randomly or appears every 2 years. So we would like to know that this person is giving money for only this type of event and with which frequency. I said, but yes, but then you would like to infer from all the history what the user is giving and how much money is giving for what type of event. But that's a completely different thing. Yes, but we want to do so, and we didn't know that before. Okay, but then it was 500 lines, because we had to infer, to check all the history of the payments over time, to classify all the events, to say how much money, and try to come up with a profile. And then in the end, maybe, do you want to delete it, or you want to have this donator only for specific events? Yes or no? So in the end, it was 500 lines and a few more sketches. But if we had prototyped that before, probably we would have seen that much earlier than expected. When you invite people to check your prototype, you can imagine to have 4 roles. The greeter, you put user at ease and you get the data. You have the facilitator, who is the person who is giving instructions to the end users. So this person is the only person allowed to speak. You have also the observer, but this person cannot talk. It's just observing what is going on, what people are saying. Oh, this is bad design, but don't tell it. I said, bad design. Oh, this screen is nice, but I thought that maybe this should be improved. Okay, note it. So this is the observer. Of course, you can use the computer to trace that also. Don't exceed 1 hour, because after that, end users are tired. And again, it's a human facility to give our best ideas in the first amount of time. If you give them more time, it's not needed. Not only they will be tired, but they will not give you much more ideas or much better ideas than you have had before, surprisingly. Last step, 4th step, discussing, reflecting. When you have gathered all feedback from people, try to sort them by frequency, by importance, by criticality, whatever. It's like usually when somebody is approaching, oh, can you do this for me? And I said, okay. Is this urgent? No. It's not urgent. Okay, but if it is not urgent, is this important? No, but I would like to... so it's not urgent, it's neither urgent nor important. Okay, then I will do this later. Or maybe is it urgent? Yes, but is it important? No, but I would like to do it for tomorrow. So you mean that it's urgent for you, but only for you, but not for the whole organization. So you can sort things. So it's a way to handle. Otherwise, you will see a lot of people always asking you a lot of urgent things that are important for them, but not for you. I'm sure you have already experienced that, right? So ask, is this urgent? If not urgent, is this important? Maybe yes or maybe no. And always think about the Pareto rule. I don't know if you are familiar with that. Have you already heard about the Pareto rule? So Pareto is an Italian mathematician who observed, it's not a theorem, it's not proved. He says that if you imagine to have an entire system, say for a computer-based system application, and you have 100% of functions, you don't need 100% of functions. If you want to have the most important functions, which is 80% of the function of the system, you will devote 20% of your efforts for this 80% of functions. But if you want to have this little extra, very nice to have features, you will have to devote 80% of your efforts in time, money, resource, people, just for this. So please resist to the temptation when people will say, I would like to have this, and then that, and then that, and then that. So they will escalate, and in the end, your system will explode. It already happened to me. I remember, for instance, we had a prototyping session with people, and at first glance, they were looking very friendly, so we were prototyping things, so we were gathering things. Oh, this is a nice feature. Yes, good idea. Okay. not it. Oh, yes, yes, and confirm. And then another one said, oh, I've discovered this too. Oh, okay, very important. And then we were adding features and features and features. And in the end, when we make the list, and we came up with this list to the marketing people, said, oh, this is just too expensive. We will throw this project to the trash. And then the end users said, ha, 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 we are very happy. We will not change the system right now. And then I understood that, of course, when you prototype, you have to resist also to that. Because people sometimes tend to torpedo your system or your project. Not all, eh? It could happen. Prototyping, you can do it with, well, it's not so much important. You can have one person working on single device, like for instance, if you want to prototype one user working on a smartphone, or maybe a smartphone and a tablet. If you want to have your future system running on different devices, you can do that. You can have different users working on the same system, or different users working with different systems. I will show you later on some examples, so I will skip this for a minute, so as to reach the examples later on. Okay, now we have seen how, but with which means can we really prototype a user interface? There are different means. The simplest one is, of course, pen and paper. This is called the quick and dirty manner, because you can draw things very easily, straightforwardly. Just gather all the material you can. Glue, paper, pencil, highlighters, eraser, Tipex, whatever you want, glue, scissors, and just draw things, or cut, paste, etc. So this is easy, but it's not very flexible. If you want to change things, you have to always to redraw, to recut, to reglue, so it's tedious in the end. These days, I'm not observing anymore many companies using this approach, or very rarely, very rarely. So you can come up with sketches like this. People have drawn labels, parts of information. I don't know if you can read it, but here it's on a flipboard. We have a very first sketch of an entire system. You can assemble these sketches in order to form what is called a storyboard, like for movies. They do storyboards for years. So we didn't invent anything here, we just reproduce. Like for instance, here is a storyboard of a cartoon, but exactly the same. You can say this user, here is the first sketch, then another one, then if you choose this, you go there. So you make a storyboard in the end. A nice technique that I like also is the spotlight, where you have different pages already pre-printed, and you can flip them like a book, and you can cover or uncover parts depending on your device. If you're working on a smartphone, or if you want to test on a smartphone, you cover some part of it. Like here it's for a smartphone, but horizontal in landscape mode. You can also use your most favorite drawing software, like OmniGraffle, PowerPoint, whatever. The most important advantage with this kind of software is that you can draw whatever you want. You're completely free. So this is very good for end user because they feel very creative. They can draw everything. The drawback of that is that you have to draw everything yourself, including like here, this is a slider, this is a window, this is a push button. So you have to draw everything yourself, which in the end is very tedious because it's very repetitive. People have to draw screen after screen, so it's not very engaging. I prefer to imagine things, to create, and then to sketch, but not lose my time for drawing everything. So again, well, this is still used in some companies because they like it or they don't want to change. So the shortcomings of physical means is that, of course, everything is physical, so it's unflexible. You cannot change things. Or as soon as you want to change, you have to redraw. It's hard to reproduce. And also you can lose the history. Sometimes it happens that in the design team or in the development team say, oh, yesterday we had a very good idea, but what was the design that we sketched yesterday? Lost, sorry. Or because we trashed it, or it was drawn on the whiteboard and then we erase it, or maybe we took a picture but it's not exactly the same, so we lost the trace. You can use user interface builders, which are the environment in any interactive development environment, like for instance here it's the one for Visual Studio for Basic here, you can draw the interface, of course. But then you're completely tied to the look and feel of the operating system. For instance, here it is for Microsoft Windows, of course. Microsoft Visual Studio is only for Windows. Can you imagine to draw an iOS interface on that? Impossible. So if you are sure that you will develop a interface for Windows, maybe you can use Microsoft Visio. But then you are completely tied to the type of widget allowed by this platform, which is not nice, at least at the beginning. Of course, you have a list of all possible widgets, and then you just drag them, you drop them on the working area, and you sketch it. Or at least, well, you draw it here. You don't sketch, you draw. So you're losing some part of the creativity. I don't like to start with this one. I like to prefer that for the second step, but not for the first one. Even if I know that we will be using Microsoft Windows for developing the future interface, because it does not support the end user in the creativity. Otherwise, people will think about this widget to be very right aligned or left aligned with this label, very well positioned, etc. So they will not they will not focus on the functionalities. They will focus on the look and feel, thus losing the effort. Another shortcoming of user interface builders is that if I want to prototype this user interface, which is a user interface for visualizing and managing tasks in the Gantt chart, all we can have is this. Because this part, which is a visualization part, with direct manipulation of tasks, I cannot sketch it in the user interface builder. All I have is the window, the menu bar, the icon bar, the push buttons, the scroll bar, and the message area. That's all I have. So all you get is all what is allowed by the controls. So you're losing some part. So this is why I'm no longer using any user interface builder except for special cases. So this is for very high fidelity, as you can see, because this is very much for an environment. On the other hand, you can use other systems that are completely very low fidelity. You don't know what is the look and feel. You even don't know what type of information you will display. But what you know is this region will have maybe a wizard. Here you will have a menu. Maybe here you will have a search bar, but you don't specify what is the label, the push button, etc. You just define the regions. For instance, this is supported by GUI layout. Then you can specify what type of information you can find it. So again, this is low fidelity. As you can see, there is no particular reference to any operating system. There are other tools where you can sketch things. This is the first software ever for sketching things. So you sketch web pages. Then you say, if you click on this button, you will go to that page. If you click cancel, you will return there. And then you have all the transition possible. So here, everything is sketched, which is nice because it's low fidelity, no constraint imposed by the device or the computing platform. But the problem is that nothing is recognized. So let's imagine that now your end user are happy with this. You have to give that to the developers, and they have to start from scratch. Same with this one, which is about multimedia, or this one, which is more recent, Denim. Denim is a very good, you can download it from the web. You should type Denim software for prototype. The nice thing is that you can sketch web pages. You can sketch one web page at a time, and you can see here how good the sketch is, right? And then you can sketch home page, link with other subpages, first level, second level, etc. The drawback of that is that when you are done with that, there is no recognition of what you have sketched. And the effort is lost when you have to give that to the development team. So this is the main reason why we developed a cool tool called SketchXML, where you can sketch things and the system recognizes what you have sketched for you and recognize that. So let me show you here a demo of that. You will be able to, of course, download all these slides, including the reference that I'm giving here. So here is a demo of SketchXML, which is an application for sketching any interface, graphical of course, It could be on a smartphone, tablet, pocket PC, a laptop, whatever. By sketching. So first you create a project, you specify who will be the user, whether it is a novice, an expert, what type of task, is it repetitive or not, and what type of screen. So once you have done that, you have a working area, and then I'm starting to sketch. I can write labels, I can write group boxes, and the system recognizes that for me automatically. So instead of just drawing, the system recognizes everything and creates a hierarchy of widgets that you can see on the right. So here I'm writing some labels, some edit fields, and the system recognizes that for me. Here a radio button, what is the gender, male or female. By the way, I should put female before because it's more frequent. Other radio buttons, etc., etc. So while I'm sketching, the system recognizes what I've sketched and could automatically generate a prototype for me. So as you can see, I'm not a very good drawer, but the system can do the real job. Well, this is the recognized version. You can, of course, scale in, scale out. You can sketch other screens, one screen at a time. You can also add your own gestures. Like, for instance, if you want to add another widget, like imagine you want to create a map and you want to enter a simple drawing for a map, you can do that. The system enables you to create your own gestures. So here, I don't remember which one is it. You say this is a gesture, so once the gesture is recorded, it's in there and you have it. So you can add your own one if you like. You can create other screens, like here it's a graphical area maybe, I don't remember. No, an error. Okay, that's it. A message saying thank you for whatever. Then you switch to navigation between the screens. You can draw some arrows from one screen to another, saying that if you click on this button, you will go to that screen, etc. Or if you input this data, you will go there. So from this application, not only the system recognizes what you have sketched, but it also generates the code for you. So if you want to show people, maybe not at the beginning, but maybe later, it can generate HTML5 code for you. So even without coding any single line of code, you have already a user interface. So for instance, here in this case, we have prototype a simple user interface for a pocket PC, and in the end, the system generates this user interface for you in just 1 minute. So very quickly, without programming any line of code, without knowing any programming language, I can already prototype a user interface. So here is an example of all the levels of fidelity. First, I'm starting to sketch things, and as you can see, I'm not a very good drawer. It's completely ragged lines and it's unpolished. Here I've tried to draw a group box with radio buttons, here check boxes, here maybe a single line, here a drop-down list, here a list box or whatever. But the system recognizes that for me, fortunately for me. And then it says, probably you have drawn this. Okay, so this is low fidelity because it's very, very simple sketch. But then since the system can recognize that for you, it automatically transforms that into medium fidelity, where the drawings are already a little bit more polished, a little bit, more aligned, like here left aligned, or maybe a little bit right aligned, or maybe a little bit here. And at least you can have a better idea of how the user interface will look like. And if you really want, you say, oh, please give me the look and feel of Windows. Okay, this is the look and feel for Windows, well, Java for Windows, but we can have 4 or 5 different look and feels. So even before producing the user interface. So this is low fidelity, medium fidelity, and high fidelity. And at any time you can work at any fidelity level. So if you if you show this interface to an end user, say, oh no, I don't want this, and then you want to change, you just erase it, you change it, and then you can come back at any stage. So this is why we call it multi-fidelity, because you can work at any level of fidelity you want. So for this purpose, you have a lot of different widgets with different representation that are coming from previous user studies. So here are some of them, just to give you an idea. There are a lot of them. The drawback of that is that, of course, even if it is very easy to sketch, people have to remember the different representation, which is not so easy. Fortunately, they can add their own. Another possibility, again, is that you can use drawing tools like Microsoft Visio. Are you familiar with Microsoft Visio? I don't know. Or at least, okay. So the nice thing is that you can download so-called stencils, where you have already the widgets predefined. So again, you can drag them and you drop them into a working area so as to draw, not to sketch, you draw a prototype of the user interface. So that's quick, but again, you're completely tied to an operating system. Here it's Windows. Of course, you can have another stencil with other look and feels. So roughly, usually I'd like, when I'm trying to prototype things, I'd like to start with a very low level, like here, like a sketching tool. I prefer to sketch, because low level fidelity is important for end user. They don't feel constrained, they feel open. Otherwise, people will have the impression that finally the system is already decided for them and there is no longer any degree of freedom. That's not nice for them. Then, when they try to say that their feedback is positive, then I will switch to medium fidelity, maybe with Microsoft Visio, and then with high fidelity. And here you can see the difference. This is low fidelity, medium fidelity, and high. Another drawback of that tool, although it's very nice to sketch, it's very natural, you can give that in the hands of the user. And we have a lot of experiments where they can sketch on tablet. They like to sketch. Everybody likes to sketch in principle, and you don't need to be a very good sketcher or drawer. Another shortcoming is that it's one user at a time. So this is the main reason why we have developed another tool called Gambit. You can access that online. It's free, which is a collaborative prototyping tool. Imagine that you have a development team where you are here located in Grenoble. You have your end user located in Finland, and you have your development team located maybe in Australia, whatever. So how to put all of these people all together, especially for prototyping things? When you have people distributed in time and space over the globe, would it be nice to have one single tool where everybody can contribute at any time? So the answer is that one. So you can create freely a project, and at any time, with any platform, because it's HTML5. So if you have iOS, if you have Android, if you have Windows or Linux, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your operating system. It does not matter the size of your screen, whether it is touchable or point and click by mouse. Everybody can sketch. You post your sketch on the project, and then you can assemble all the sketches together so as to form a complete user-face prototype. So let me show you a video of that, just to give you the flavor of it. So here is a small video of a person trying to sketch user interface on a tablet. So in this case, this person is using an Android tablet. So because people come with their own device, sometimes they come with one device, sometimes they come without any device. So we give them whatever they want. So they sketch individual screens like here. So this person was responsible to draw the login screen. And here with a table, I don't remember the case study, whatever. So this person has already sketched that and now define the navigation. For instance, this is an item of a menu, which is sensible. This is an OK button or whatever. And if this is a link for a transition to another screen. So all these regions are marked in order to ensure some transition to another screen. As you can see here, the person is drawing a transition back, and the system recognizes that for you again and creates what is needed afterwards, and then back. Okay. You can zoom in, zoom out, you can create others, you can link them, and everybody at any time can post sketches. So even if you have different people working at different locations, for instance in remote locations, or even if they are working co-located, you can work them together. So it's very nice because you can say, you and you will be responsible for this screen, you work now, and you post. And then you send another mail because the other guys are maybe in Australia, so they're sleeping. When they will be awakened, they will have to draw the other screens. And then you can assemble them because they are all in one project at a time.
I see an icon.
Let me see if I can... okay, so this is for one at a time. What is nice also, since it is completely agnostic of the device, everybody can contribute, everybody can participate. So here, for instance, you can see this person came with an iPad, I think, or this person came with an Android, and this person, unfortunately, came without any platform. So what we gave, it's a tabletop environment, so it's a large table where you can draw on the table. Exactly, you don't draw exactly with a pen. It's a pen that is recognized by the system. So again, it's not like a pencil. Otherwise, you have some trace on the table. Sometimes people have tried also with pencil, leaving some traces on the table. But fortunately, we can erase that afterwards. We don't want to stop them. But we tend to say them, well, you can really use a pencil if you want, but this will be not recognized by the system. So please use the stylus. So here you can see a person trying to think about what type of screen I would like to have, and sketching on the table. You don't see, but there is a projector, a high fidelity projector on the ceiling, projecting what is on the table, and the system recognizes that for you again. So for that you have different tools. Well, you can browse that in the slides, like you can sketch one screen at a time, you can assemble them in order to make a prototype, and then you can test. The nice thing is that in the end, when you have gathered all the different screens with the transition, you can test it. You just send a URL to a person, and the person remotely can sketch test by clicking, by entering some data, by ensuring some navigation within one screen or from one screen to another, and everything is captured by the system. So if you send this URL to people, let's say 10 people, and they use that maybe for 1 hour, everything is traced. So in the end, you can discover what has been used, what has not been used, what is frequent, what is not frequent, what people like, what people don't like. So first step is define the structure of individual screens, right? Like you have seen in the video. Second step, you define the navigation within each screen or across screens. And then you test. So here is a real example of a test that we made for, I'm not sure about the right word, but a steel galvanization, is that correct? Industry? So it's an industry where you have a very large piece of steel arriving, it's 10 tons of steel, like this, in cylinders, and then they have to prepare that, and it's 150 meters long. So it looks like this. I think I have a picture. Yes. So this is a very long line, and they have hundreds of machines that they have to control permanently. The problem is that sometimes they have a control room with a lot of different screens, different operating systems. Sometimes they have mobile devices to control all these machines. But the problem is that they are completely different. So people are a little bit lost because they have to use very different systems to control the machines. So what we had to do is to prototype one single interface on mobile device to let them to control all these machines throughout the production line from the beginning to the end, 150 meters between the two, with one system. And before developing that, we had to prototype that. So we came up with this type of screen on a smartphone. So we did these sketches, and then we assigned them transition, like, is this machine okay? No, it's not okay. Why is it? What type of mistake or what type of failure? Can you classify this? And you could do that with a stylus, you can do that with a touch, or you can do that with by pressing function keys. And in the end, this is what we have. This is, of course, a little bit hard to read, but when you run it, it runs like a real application. Of course, everything is drawn, it's not a real application, but the behavior is quite close. Last step is reflecting. So since the system traces everything, here you can see log files, people can then review what happened. For instance, if some people experience some trouble using this system, we can trace it and say, this person, look, here on this screen, this screen was very bad for that person. Why? Because this person spent a lot of time to understand, so we have to rework this one. Okay, so let's create a new version of that and replace that. So here's another example. Now, this is easy for graphical interface, but you can of course say, now, what's up with gesture-based interface? So I don't mean by gesture, it's not just touch or point and click, but also gesture like maybe pinch in, out, zooming in, zooming out, or tap, single tap, double tap, or even, for instance, Kinect-based 3D gestures. For instance, if I say this is okay, this is not okay, stop, etc. So this is not so complicated today to recognize. For instance, who has seen the movie Minority Report? Please raise your hand. Or who did not see yet the movie Minority Report? So assignment for next week, you have to look at this movie. Can I have 5 minutes for showing that?
Sure.
Just for the fun of it, because it's a very nice example of gesture. Please allow me 1 minute to find out if I can find it. So I will not tell you exactly the story. So real assignment, you have to really see this movie. Because when people saw that movie, they think that it was futuristic, but no, it was already done. Today it's very possible to do it today. So let me see if I can find out easily. If I can find it very easily, then yes. Yes. Fortunately, I have it here. So, in Minority Report, the star is... Who is the star?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, right? Thank you. Who is playing a kind of policeman, and is equipped with a system for gesture. Here is it.
Yes.
So he's looking at videos, and everything is done by gesture. I mean 3D gestures. So for instance, this is for going down in the movie. So everything is in 3D. This is, for instance, stop and make a zoom in, zoom out, closer, closer. As you can see, it's equipped with gloves. Anyway, no, throw it. Go to another movie. And this is also very nice, because in this very sophisticated movie, unfortunately, this guy is very poor because he has to make a physical copy-paste. He has to move a real glass window from one location. So, on the one hand, you have very sophisticated 3D mid-air move gesture, but this poor guy is equipped with a very old copy-paste. And you see, he has to move, take the window with the copy. No, first make the copy, then paste, and then move it to the other screen. Wow. This is completely out of fashion. This is more interesting. Okay, now we can drag the movies on the surface area, open it, and control the movie with 3D gesture. So when this movie was introduced, and you will see if you have not seen the movie, people were thinking, oh, can we have computer control just by 3D gesture? And is that so complicated? Well, no. This is, well, so this is the minority movie version. This is our version that we did. Of course, it's not so advanced technologically, but this is it. So here, sorry for the resolution, it's exactly the same type of gesture. So this person is looking at what movie? Minority Report, and is controlling the movie exactly with like a jock. I say like stop, or step by step forward, backward, or go ahead or faster or slower. So here this person is doing exactly the same gesture. Of course it's not so nice because the glove, you see, is very intrusive. And this has been done with our friends at University of Castilla-La Mancha, Victor Lopez and others. So here this person say, okay, stop the movie now. Ah, she was a little bit surprised. Okay, now open or go step by step. And she's looking at, now forward, because she chose this, stop again. And she was a little bit, and say, go now step by step, like with a jogging, okay. Backward or forward, frame by frame, or then just release, go ahead. So this was not so complex to do, but of course it was not so attractive like in the movie with Tom Cruise. So this is what I'm referring to 3D gesture. So even for this kind of user interface, of course, this is very difficult to prototype. All what you can do today is, this is what I'm doing, is to mimic this gesture by having a graphical representation, like for instance here for 3D gesture or for gesture on surfaces. So if you have, for instance, I don't know, in your project, who is doing a touchable interface, or who is envisioning a touchable interface? You do? Okay, great. So my most favorite resource is this one, GestureCons. If you go to this website, you will see all the possible gestures that are enabled by an operating system. So you will see all versions of iOS, Windows Phone, or whatever. And you will see a drawing of all these gestures drawn in a very consistent way. So what I'm doing is, let's say for instance, if I'm using iOS 9.3, then I can see all the gestures. I pick the icons what I want, and then I associate them to transition. Like for instance, if I want to have a zoom in, zoom out, so I will take the corresponding gesture, so it's not here, or maybe, no, this one is for rotating. And you have all the gestures with 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers. I think it's not more, because otherwise it's multi-touch. And then you can use these icons to represent what type of gestures you want to use in the prototype. So here you have other examples. So this is my most favorite feature. You have also another one here where you can draw a smartphone with the comfort zone. This is for the left hand thumb. For instance, if I'm using a smartphone, this is my comfort zone for the left one, this is for the right one. This is the reachable area on the bottom, at the top. So this is very nice for expressing what type of gesture you want to prototype. Of course, it does not generate a real touchable interface like that. Not yet. If you really know your target operating system, like for instance iOS 9.3, for instance, this is my most favorite software, which is UIKit's sketch resource, where you have already all the patterns for iOS. So all the tables, the menus, the maps, or the ways information can be represented are already there. So you don't need to draw them. You just copy paste, and then you can adapt them for depending on your case. So if you have an HCI project where you want to address iOS interface, I really like this one. Or for tablets, my most favorite software is called Blueprint. Blueprint is a very nice one, exactly in the same vein as the other one, but you can prototype the entire navigation, even with animation effects, visual effects, and transition, which is very nice to have an idea. So Without coding any line of Objective-C, I can have, well, usually it takes me 2 or 3 hours to have the very first iOS prototype for an iPad, for instance. I didn't try yet the iPad Pro. For other type of user interface, there are also some prototyping tools. Here is a list of some of them. For instance, if you want to have an interface for a vocal interface, like for vocal service, like for instance, when you phone and you hear for English, press 1, pour le français, tapez 2, voor Nederlands, druk 3, etc. So you can prototype that as well with this type of tool. It's called Suede. For multimodal one, you can use Crossweaver, etc., etc. Now, there are also commercially available software. So in your future life, which I wish you the best one, if you have some budget, or if you want to ask the budget to your manager, please ask some budget, at least for instance, for some of them. My most favorite one is Acture. You can download the free trial. This nice thing, this is probably the most advanced commercial software I've ever seen for user-interface prototyping. Not only it covers a lot of features, like transitions, data input, data output, visualization, animation, visual effects, and all what you have in the end is a URL you can send to your end users. You have, I think you can even try the free trial for 10 days or something like that.
No, it's 30 days.
Oh, 30 days. Ah, okay. Or maybe, for instance, Professor Gaëlle Calvary can ask to Acture to have a 1-year academic license. I did that once, but you have to renew that every year. And you have to send a report with all the people who have used it, etc. in your class. InVision is also nice, or another one that I like also very much, and this one has also a free limited version, is Flood UI. It's very fast. The nice thing is that everything is on the web, so you don't need to install any plugin, no add-on, no setup. You don't install anything, you just log in and you start. Or for Android, this is my most favorite prototyping environment. So, how much time do I have? Ah, okay. Just a few things before ending. Who can be involved in the user interface development or prototyping? Well, virtually anybody, but not invite everybody, because otherwise you will have to collect so many data from, or so many different opinions that in the end you will be killed. Especially, don't invite marketing people, because they will say, oh, this is not, usability is not important, but we want to have this customer to look at this product because it's our landmark product, but this is not usability, it's marketing. Or managing people, because sometimes they say, oh, it's over budget, so don't do it. But they forget that if the user says, we want to have this feature, you have to have it. Avoid this kind of thing, like the user asking, you developer, could you implement this prototype very fast, yes or no? Oh no, it's very complex, so oh, you are so idiot, etc. So I'm just skipping now until this last thing. So what you have to keep in the end, so this is for illustration. Okay, now for your assignment, for instance, for your HI project, just to sum up a few things. Before going to prototype, think about what will be the environment in which you will prototype things. Start, for instance, with low fidelity. We have seen some examples, like the sketching part. Progressively move to more or to higher levels of fidelity and also more details. You can use, of course, different software for that. But don't try to start with high fidelity at first. Otherwise, people will be very narrow in the feedback they will provide to you. Select a target population, not too much. Always try to justify why you have chosen this or that software or this or that approach or this level of fidelity. Because then you can reason about that. Don't invite your colleagues or your friends. You can invite the friends of your friends. Yes, that's you can do. You can start different techniques, but nowadays it's very hard that people are using paper and pencil, unless you want to really make it quick and dirty. And always report on findings. sorting them by importance, priority. I remember, is this urgent? Ah, no, okay. Then is it important? Ah, that's another thing. And then iterate by increasing the level of fidelity. So how many iterations? It depends. But usually I rarely do more than 5 iterations, because otherwise I'm losing too much time and I'm not progressing towards a very good, or I mean a significantly better interface prototype. So thank you very much. I hope that was interesting for you. Any question?